All right, so this week we are going to take time to talk about one of the two documentation formats that you'll be learning how to do and how to implement this semester. MLA style and format. I know that a lot of you guys are familiar with MLA. You've used it before in some form or fashion, but I know that a lot of you guys get anxiety when trying to remember or think about how to format things appropriately, or how to put together a works cited page in the correct form. So we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of MLA format and how to best document your sources both intertextually and on a works cited page, all in the effort to avoid that nasty, dirty P word plagiarism. So just a couple of basics. What is MLA? And every time you think about MLA, it stands for the Modern Language Association. And what that is simply it's a style or formatting that is often used in the disciplines in the humanities. So, like if you are writing a paper or publishing an article, or doing anything like that in English, in the arts, in anything that's not science or history, you're going to cite things using and format things using MLA guidelines. Well, what does MLA kind of regulate? It regulates how your document is formatted. It regulates how you formulate your in-text citations, and how to put together your works cited list. Works cited, a works cited page is all style documentations have a list of bibliographic information for sources that are used, and works cited is the what do you want to call it? The specific title that is MLA specific. So if you write an APA paper, you wouldn't call it a works cited page, you would call it a reference page. So if you use Chicago, you wouldn't call it a works cited page, you would call it whatever Chicago calls it. So works cited is specific to and limited to MLA style. All right, so how to formulate or format a paper in MLA format. And you guys, it's, I don't want to say it's easy to remember, but a lot of it is because a lot of your Google Docs or Word doc already have a lot of these things kind of set up. And what I mean by that is your 1 inch margins. That's typical for any kind of word processor. But general guidelines, and this is also for any for APA format too. Everything is double space everything. You want to use 12 point Times New Roman font, have 1 inch margins, and every paragraph, the first line is indented. And I think that we learn that from a young age, that all paragraphs are indented, but specifically MLA guidelines require the first line of the paragraph to be indented. The second thing that makes MLA format unique is the first page. MLA format, there's no title page, and in the upper left hand corner, not in the margin area, but in the upper left hand corner, you want to have this kind of list of your name, your instructor's name, your course title, and the date that the assignment is due. And I want you guys to pay specific attention to the way the date is ordered. It's the day, the month, and the year. And the reason MLA format does this is because MLA doesn't like to use a lot of commas in their documentation style. So you want the day, the month, the year that the assignment is due. So for example, your first paper is due on the 27th of June 2021. So that is the day that you will have in your upper left hand corner. And if you notice, every time I write a date in our class, I always put it in this kind of format. I think that America is the only country that doesn't formulate their dates this way, but I digress. In the upper, like I said, in the upper left hand corner, you want your name, my name. Well, I'm not this person, but you want your name, your instructor's name, the course name, so English 111, and the date that the assignment is due in this particular order. You want to have your title centered in the paper title. You want it to be centered like this is right here. And notice that it is not, there's not anything special about this title. It's not italicized, it's not bolded, it's not bigger in any kind of bigger font. It's not underlined. It's not any of that. It's uniform with the rest of the paper. The only thing that makes it, that sets it apart to indicate that it's a title is that it's centered. In the upper right hand corner, you want to have a header, which means it's on every single page, including the first one. You want your last name and the page number. So this is in the upper left hand corner on the first page only. This, your last name and the page number, is on every single page from beginning to end. So keep that in mind. You can also, if you need a refresher, in your little Seagull, there is a sample MLA style paper, and it will remind you again about how to format that first page. But these, the upper left-hand corner, the upper right-hand corner, and the way that the title is formatted are things that I'm going to be looking at when I grade your first MLA style paper. All right. The next thing that I want to talk about in regards to MLA format is how to formulate in-text citations. Just a reminder in case you guys don't know what I mean when I say in-text or intertextual citations. All I mean is that an in-text citation is the brief reference in your text that indicates the source you consulted. It directs your reader to the entry in your works cited list for that source. And this in-text citation should be unobtrusive. And what I mean by that is that it should provide the citation information without interrupting your own text. So for that reason, all intertextual citations should go at the end of the sentence they're seen in, and I'll talk about that in a second. And included in that parenthetical in-text citation is the author's last name and page number. So what does that look like? It's very simple. It's as uncomplicated as it can be. It has the author's last name and the page number. Keep in mind that there's no comma, there's none of that stuff in an MLA style. Oops, how do I see here? None of that stuff in your in-text citation for MLA format. Think about it like a wonderful, beautiful swimming pool, right? If my in-text citation is my swimming pool, all I want is me and the, whatever the page number is, friends that I've got swimming in there. I don't want any poop. I don't want any pee. I don't want any of that. I just want a clean clear swimming pool all to myself. So think about it that way. So that is what you need in your intertextual citation for MLA style format: the author's last name and the page number. So another way to kind of look at it in how it's formatted and how it's punctuated is here I have, my quotes from my source, right? But you notice that my in-text citation is see, here is my first quote. I don't want to put my in-text citation here because it's obtrusive. It interrupts the flow of the sentence. Instead, I have it at the very end of the sentence that I have my quotes in. And keep in mind, like, I know you guys are thinking, well, this isn't me. I want to make sure that you know the difference between my sources and myself. Well, I do know that because they're offset in quotation marks. And we'll talk about this more next unit when we talk about integrating quotes and things like that. But I do want you guys to keep in mind that the in-text citation goes at the end of the sentence. There's no punctuation at the close of the parentheses, and not the parentheses. There's no punctuation at the close of the quotation mark, and your period goes at the end of the closed parentheses. So here's my author and the author's last name. I hope that makes sense, but if not, this is something that we're going to be talking about more and more as we go through the semester. However, I do want you guys just to keep in mind that it is the author's last name and page number, the number, nothing else, only in your in-text citation for MLA format. Another example I have here is to show you that if you use the author's name in the sentence as a signal phrase, we'll talk more about signal phrases at another point. If the author's last name is in your sentence, you do not need to have it in the parentheses. So here I have my signal phrase, right? So I don't need my author's last name in my parentheses. I just need the page number. If I don't include the author's last name in my sentence, I would need to include the author's last name in my in-text citation. And keep in mind, either way, Wordsworth, wherever I have it, it's going to correspond to the entry, the bibliographical information for my entry on my works cited page for that particular source. So I do also want to briefly kind of mention, if it is in your works cited page, right? If you have a source on your works cited page, it has to be indicated and used in the body of your paper intertextually. So if it's in your paper intertextually, it's got to be in your works cited page. If it's in your works cited page, it's got to be in your paper intertextually. You can't have things on your works cited page that you haven't quoted from or indicated that you've quoted from in the body of your paper. Otherwise, it looks like you've plagiarized, or you've used sources that you haven't accurately and appropriately cited in the body of your paper. So, all right, I am almost finished. So that's in-text citations. I will talk very briefly about where you can find, sometimes there are different authors or different kinds of sources have different types of authors, and you can look in your MLA style handbook if you need to figure out how to cite a source with no author. You can look in your MLA style handbook, and it will guide you for how to do that. So I do want to briefly touch on Works Cited, your Works Cited page, the basics. Formatting your works cited pages is pretty important. And the one thing, the couple of things that I want you guys to keep in mind, that a works cited page belongs on its own separate page. It's a greedy, spoiled little child, and it needs its own space. It needs its own room. It's separate from the rest of the paper. So even if you finish with only one line on your fifth page, your works cited page is always going to begin on the top of the sixth page, or however you want to do it. The title, works cited. I don't care if you have 1 or 100 works or entries on your works cited page, even if it's just one, it's always going to be titled works cited. That is centered in the middle of the page. Your sources or your entries are going to be alphabetized by by the author's last name. It's not numbered, and there is a hanging indent for each source. So if it goes on to the next page, or if it's more than one line, every line subsequent to the first has to be indented. And that's not the same as being centered. If you guys need to know how to do that, I'll create a little video showing you how to do that in both Word and in Google Docs. So moving on, and I think that the next thing that I'm going to talk about is what people find a little intimidating when it comes to formatting a reference on or an entry for a works cited page. Each entry in the list of works cited is made up of core elements given in a specific order. The core elements should be listed in the order in which they appear here. And each element is followed by punctuation. In any given entry, right, the first thing that you're going to see is the author's name, last name first. I should probably put that there. Followed by a period. The title of a source, the title of what you're doing, followed by a period. The title of a container, if there is one. So if I have the title of an article like hashtag shame on you, right? That's the title of the source. But the title of the article was found in a larger work, which was a journal, which was the Chronicle of Higher Education. So you need to have that. Other contributors, if there are any, like editors, version number, version and number, that usually has to do with articles from a database. Publisher and publication date and location. And what I mean by that is a website or page range for a source. Keep in mind, guys, that I am not asking you guys to memorize this at all, right? I'm only asking you guys to be aware that there is a specific order in which these things have to appear. It's okay if you're like, gosh, I need to cite a work on a website, or I need to cite a film, or I need to cite an article on a database, and I don't know how to do that. Look it up in your Little Seagull handbook, or go on to the OWL Purdue is a great source to show you how to give you the formula or the format of how to look things up and cite them appropriately. You'll notice I will, what we're looking at here is something that I am putting in your module for this week. It's a document, it's a Google Doc that I have made for you all called MLA Refresher. And it gives you an overview of everything that I've talked about in this very long, and I apologize for how long it is, presentation, and also giving you the format for common bibliographic references in MLA style. So if, for example, you need to cite an article accessed from a database, here is the formula. Think about like it as a kind of a math formula. The formula of the order in which things appear and how they're formatted. I've given you an example of that. If you need to cite a class handout, or if you need to cite an article from an anthology or a book with one author, I've given you this kind of guide with the formula of how to put together those works cited references. And I know that you guys are saying, well, it's got to be something easier than doing this. And to that, I say no. You just kind of have to grin and bear it. But once you figure out how it works, it's really quite simple. All you have to do is figure out if there's something other than these that you need to know how to cite. Look it up in your MLA style in the Little Seagull handbook, because it shows you how to cite all sorts of weird types of things like YouTube videos and tweets and you name it, it's got a way for you to cite it. So as I said, I'm not asking you guys to memorize how to do this. I'm just giving you the tools to know how to formulate those works cited entries. Keep in mind that in works cited entries and in MLA format in general, books, journals, periodicals, magazines, websites, films, film titles, they're all italicized. Things like short stories or newspaper, magazine, journal, article titles are in quotation marks. So keep that in mind, and we'll talk more about this as we move through the course. Finally, I do want to just show you an example of what a works cited page looks like. Here I have my upper right hand corner with my name and my page number. Works cited is on its separate page. And in the center of that, I have the title, works cited, and then I have my various sources alphabetized by author's last name. And when I say hanging indent, this is what I mean by a hanging indent. That's what it looks like. Here's my first, and then everything underneath of that is offset. So yeah, this is what a works cited page looks like. A book, an article from a website. So notice my article title is in quotation marks. A film, uh, an article from an anthology or a textbook, if you will, and then an article from an article accessed through the library databases. So these are all examples that I've given you on the MLA refresher sheet. So another thing, a word of advice, when in doubt, when you don't when you're not sure of how to cite something, when in doubt, look it up. Your Little Seagull, the textbook that you are supposed to have for this class, has a wonderful MLA style handbook on it's 50 pages, but I'm asking you guys to keep in mind that is the best place to look when you have MLA questions, or you can ask me. But if you are looking for advice when we are no longer together, that is the best place to look. Like I said, MLA Al Purdue is a good place to look. The MLA website is a good place to look. So if you're in doubt, look it up. You also want to avoid citation generator tools like easybid.com and things like that because chances are they're going to give you something in a wrong format. And the other thing is they only do very simple citation generate they only generate very simple citations, not some of the more complex things that you're going to be using in your academic writing career. I also would say to avoid MLA templates that they have on Microsoft Word or Google Docs because they are out of date. They aren't working with MLA 8th edition. I think they're still in 6th edition. So you want to avoid MLA templates and citation generators that come with your word processors of any kind. The only kind of template that you really need is the Little Seagull handbook and um, this kind of guideline right here because that's MLA is kind of clean, basic, and simple. So that is all I have for you guys for now. I know that I droned on and I know it's kind of dull and boring, but this is kind of stuff that this is the kind of stuff that you guys need. So let me know if you have any questions and happy MLA formatting.